Alright, so in this video what we're looking at is sentences classified according to structure. And the way we do this is we have to count the number of independent clauses and have to also decide whether or not there are any subordinate clauses. So here are the four types of sentences in the English language. The first is a simple sentence, and a simple sentence has just one independent clause and no subordinate clauses. So there will only be one subject and verb. There won't be any adverb, adjective, or noun clauses. So here we have Andres Segovia, subject, revolutionized, verb, and then here is a direct object. So this only has one sentence, one independent clause. There's no adverb, adjective, or noun clause here. A compound sentence. Compound means some sort of combinations, things that are together. This contains two or more independent clauses and no subordinate clauses. And there are only two ways to do this. A compound sentence can either be combined with a semicolon. So if you see a semicolon, it's going to be compound. Or you can use a comma and a coordinating conjunction. And the coordinating conjunctions form an acronym, FANBOYS, fanboys. And that's for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So if you see a semicolon or a comma followed by one of these coordinating conjunctions, it's going to be compound. Here is the example. Segovia brought classical guitar music to a wide audience. That could stand alone as a sentence. Comma, and is the A in fanboys. And he talked many composers into writing for the guitar. He talked many composers into writing for the guitar could also stand alone as a sentence. So this is compound because it has two or more, in this case just two, independent clauses. And they're joined here by this comma fanboys. The other way to do this is to just use a semicolon and no fanboys. Alright, a complex sentence. This has one independent clause, so one group of words with a subject and a verb that can stand alone, and at least one subordinate clause, which is a group of related words that can't stand alone. So there's going to be one independent, could stand by itself clause, and then there's going to be an adjective, adverb, or noun clause. Here's the example. When he played. When he played is a subordinate adverb clause. This can't stand alone. When he played cannot stand alone, but it has a subject and a verb. He played. So this is an adverb clause. It's sometimes seen that two or three guitars were playing. This could stand alone. This is our independent clause. So we have one subordinate clause here, and we have one independent clause here. And so this is a complex sentence. The last type of sentence is a compound complex sentence. And this has two independent clauses. So this will have a semicolon or a comma fanboys. But it also has at least one subordinate clause. He was a master of technique. That is our independent clause. And then we have our comma fanboys right there, comma and. When he wanted, this here is our subordinate clause. That could not stand alone as a sentence. He could make the guitar weep. Here is our last clause, and it is an independent clause. This could stand alone. He could make the guitar weep. So a simple sentence will only have one clause. A compound sentence will have two independent clauses. A complex sentence will have one complete clause, one independent clause, and one subordinate clause. And then a compound complex, this is our super sentence. It will have two independent clauses. It has to have this comma fanboys or a semicolon, and then it has to have some sort of subordinate clause too. Let's go look down below, and I'll do the first five of these with you. And all we have to do is read the sentence and decide what kind of clause it is. So, or not clause, what kind of sentence it is. So number one, this crystal comes from England and is handmade. So this right here, we have, here's our subject, this crystal, and comes as our verb, from England, and is, that's also a verb, handmade. So this has one subject and two verbs, so it's tempting to say that this is maybe complex. The problem is that this one subject is doing both of these things. There's only one subject-verb relationship. So even though there are two verbs in the sentence, since there's no subject right here before is, and the crystal just does both of these, we have a sentence with two verbs, but we don't have more than one clause. So this is a simple sentence. Number 2. We particularly enjoy the exhibition of Turner's paintings that we saw in London. So here we have an independent clause. We particularly enjoyed the exhibition of Turner's paintings. That could stand alone. That's our independent clause. But here we have we saw. We have another clause here. We have a subject and a verb. But that we saw in London can't stand alone in the sentence. So this is a subordinate clause. So we have one independent and one subordinate clause. So this is a complex sentence. CX. Number 3. Spike Lee is an acclaimed filmmaker. That is an independent clause. That could stand alone. Who writes, directs, and acts in his own movies. This has a subject, who, and a bunch of verbs, writes, directs, and acts. So this is also a clause, and this second one could not stand alone. So the first one is an independent clause because I could just end the sentence there. This right here tells us more about the filmmaker. It's an adjective clause, and this is a subordinate clause. Can't stand alone. So number 3 is also complex. All right, number 4. Confucianism, which is known to the Chinese as Juqiao, and this right here is a subordinate clause. Can't stand alone, but it has a subject and a verb, which is known. Teaches that people should behave according to their proper roles. Here's another subordinate clause, that people should behave according to their proper roles. Father and son, ruler and subject, master and servant. All of that is part of this subordinate clause. The independent clause, by the way, is Confucianism teaches. And this is our independent clause. So in this sentence we have 2 subordinate clauses and 1 independent clause. That means that this is complex. Now it's really tempting for you to say that this is a compound complex sentence because it's very long, but actually this is just one complex sentence. All right, let's skip down to number 6. Number 6 shows a good example of a compound sentence, so I'm going to skip 5. The puppet show bored the children. This is an independent clause. But this is a comma fanboys. Their parents thoroughly enjoyed it. Their parents thoroughly enjoyed it. This is an independent clause. So this is a sentence with 2 independent clauses, and it pivots at this point right here. The pivot point in a compound sentence has to be either a comma fanboys or a semicolon. This one has a comma fanboys. So this is a compound, a CD, a compound sentence. All right, so go ahead and do 5 and then the remaining 4, and good luck.